Roman engineering that was 1,000 years ahead of its time. Roads that never died. The Roman Republic never collapsed on the battlefield. It collapsed on the highway, a truth that opens a window into the entire history of the Roman Empire. Strange idea, isn't it? But if you trace the arteries of empire, you don't find them in marble statues or ruined forums, you find them underfoot. Stones, cut and locked so tightly that grass still cannot force its way through after 2,000 years. Rome did not just build roads. Rome invented the idea of empire as a network. Close your eyes. Hear it. The metallic ring of iron-shod sandals striking sparks. A legion marching 20 miles a day across mountains, swamps, deserts, grain caravans creaking with Egypt's harvest. Merchants leading donkeys loaded with Spanish olive oil. Couriers racing with orders from the Rhine to the Tiber. All of it victories, markets, feasts, and funerals moved on the same invisible foundation. Roads that never failed. By the 2nd century CE, Rome had laid down nearly 250,000 miles of roads, 50,000 of them stone-paved highways. To put that in perspective, the U.S. interstate highway system today is about 46,800 to 47,000 miles, depending on how mileage is counted and classified. Rome had already surpassed America 2 millennia earlier. Rome paved the earth with stone. America paves it with asphalt. One still stands. The other constantly cracks. Roman surveyors used a tool called the groma, a simple cross on a staff to plot lines across hills and valleys with uncanny precision. Where terrain forced resistance, they didn't bend. They built bridges. They tunneled through rock. Many Roman roads are so straight that if you extended their line today, they'd slice across entire countries like lasers. This was not just construction, it was mathematics, weaponized. But here's the hidden truth. Roman roads were not built for the people. They were built for power. Every mile was a military guarantee. A revolt in Gaul, legions could appear in days. A rival general in Spain. Troops arrived before news reached the Senate. Roads gave Rome speed. Speed gave Rome dominance. The Via Appia, built in 312 BCE, ran 350 miles to Brindisi and was known as Regina Viarum, the Queen of Roads. Large stretches still exist today, durable enough for modern cars to drive on. Rome had legions on stone highways. America has tanks on asphalt interstates, different vehicles, same blueprint. When President Eisenhower returned from World War II, he had seen Germany's autobahns, how they let armies move with terrifying efficiency. In 1956, he signed the Federal Aid Highway Act, creating the interstate system. Officially, it was for commerce and travel. Unofficially, it was for war. Highways wide enough for tanks, strong enough for missile convoys, and direct enough to redeploy troops across the continent. Look closely. The Roman blueprint is alive in American concrete. Roads as ideology. Roads don't just carry armies or goods, they carry ideas. They dictate how cities grow, how trade pulses, how empires imagine themselves. Every Roman milestone bore an emperor's name, propaganda carved in stone. This empire is eternal. This empire connects the world. Infrastructure was not neutral, it was ideology in stone. Surprising detail. Some milestones even recorded which emperor had repaired a road, reminding travelers that even maintenance was an imperial gift. Roads look like freedom, but in Rome, they were obedience paved in stone. Yet roads did more than empower, they bound. Once you build a network, you can't control everything that flows through it. Bandits traveled those same roads, so did smugglers, and plagues. The Antonine Plague of the 2nd century spread through Rome's vast networks of commerce and military movement, both by road and sea, turning its greatest strength into a weakness. In the end, the same highways that sped Rome's legions also sped its enemies. When Goths and Vandals advanced toward the Eternal City, they almost certainly exploited the Roman road network that still bound the empire together. The stones that carried Rome's armies also carried its destruction. Rome teaches us that infrastructure is never just infrastructure. It is destiny, written in stone. To build a road is to shape an empire's reach, to carve its future into the earth. So ask yourself, when you drive an interstate today, under green signs stamped with state names, are you really leaving Rome behind? Or are you still traveling its highways, roads that never died? Aqueducts, rivers in the sky. Some estimates suggest Rome may have consumed as much or even more water per person than modern cities like New York. Though estimates vary widely among scholars, and it wasn't by accident, it was by design. Water, the simplest element, the quietest force. Yet in Rome, water was power. Imagine walking into the capital at its peak. Marble colonnades, crowded streets, a million voices echoing between tenements. Cities of that size in antiquity usually drowned in filth and disease. But Rome shimmered. Fountains gushed, bathhouses steamed, latrines flushed. Even the poor could drink freely from corner spigots. How did a pre-industrial empire pull this off? The answer arches across valleys, carved into cliffs, hidden beneath hills, the aqueducts. Rivers in the sky beginning with the Aqua Appia in 312 BCE. The Romans built a network so vast it defied imagination. By the 2nd century CE, as many as 11 aqueducts supplied the capital with a flow estimated in the hundreds of millions of gallons per day, though modern reconstructions differ significantly. On a per capita basis, Rome may have rivaled or even surpassed many modern cities, and all of it moved without pumps or engines. No electricity, no turbines, only gravity, guided with astonishing precision. The Aqua Claudia, completed under Emperor Claudius in 52 CE, stretched for more than 45 miles. Its slope, roughly a few parts per thousand, extremely shallow, yet carefully measured to keep the water moving without stagnation. Surveyors achieved this with a wooden leveling instrument called the chorobates, 2,000 years later. Modern engineers still marvel at the accuracy. 1 million Romans bathe daily, 1 million New Yorkers commute daily. Both depend on invisible rivers. Rome's aqueducts were as vital as New York's subways or LA's freeways. Both networks transformed chaos into order, giving cities an artificial heartbeat through mountains and shadows when mountains stood in their way. The Romans didn't bend the path, they pierced it. Crews dug tunnels from both sides, guided by geometry alone. Sometimes they even sank vertical shafts to speed the process. Incredibly, when their picks met in the dark, the channels aligned almost perfectly. Some aqueducts included piscinae limariae, settling tanks that purified water by letting silt sink before continuing downstream. This was not just engineering, it was an early experiment in public health. Rome was centuries ahead of its time. Water as propaganda. But aqueducts were not simply utilities. They were political theater in stone. Emperors turned water into loyalty. Each new channel carried an inscription. Claudius provides, Trajan blesses, Hadrian delivers. Every fountain was an imperial gift, a liquid promise that the empire itself was eternal. Imagine the psychology. Every sip tied your survival to Rome. Emperors didn't just command armies, they commanded rivers. Cut the aqueduct in Rome, and the empire gasped. Hack the pipeline in America, and the economy gasps. Different tools, same fragility. The principle hasn't changed. Rome relied on gravity-fed stone arches. America relies on pipelines, reservoirs, and power grids. Both are lifelines, both are targets, both define the reach of empire. America has lived this story. In the early 20th century, Los Angeles was a modest desert town. Then engineer William Mulholland built the Los Angeles Aqueduct, diverting rivers from Owens Valley nearly 250 miles away. The result? Los Angeles exploded into a metropolis of millions. Owens Valley shriveled into dust. Entire communities collapsed. Water had chosen the winners and the losers. Rome would have nodded knowingly. Aqueducts are not just channels of water, they are channels of destiny. Water is weakness, but Rome's triumph hid its vulnerability. When Gothic tribes besieged the city, they didn't always storm the walls. Sometimes, they simply cut the aqueducts. Suddenly fountains dried, baths closed, sewers backed up. Trust in the empire eroded. Citizens who once bathed daily found themselves thirsting. Collapse didn't always come with fire. Sometimes, it came with silence in the pipes. Water was not free. It was obedience in liquid form. Rome weaponized abundance. As long as fountains flowed, loyalty flowed. When they stopped, so did faith in the state. The Colorado River today is shrinking, sparking lawsuits among U.S. states. In Africa, Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam has drawn threats from Egypt, which fears losing control of the Nile. In Michigan, poison water in Flint corroded not only pipes, but trust in government itself. Rome already wrote this lesson: control the water, control the people, fail to control it, and you lose them. Rome's enemies didn't need to break the gates. They only had to break the pipes for all its armies and legions. The empire's most fatal weakness was hidden in its lifelines. So the next time you turn on a faucet or watch water dance under neon lights, pause. Ask yourself, are we marveling at modern engineering? Or are we still drinking from the rivers Rome built? Rivers in the sky that never really stopped flowing? Because Rome's lesson endures. Water is never just water. It is power, loyalty, survival. And whoever controls its flow controls the future. Concrete, the immortal stone. Rome's concrete structures have stood for 2,000 years. Ours sometimes collapse in less than 50. Civilizations are remembered not only for what they conquered, but for what they left behind. Nowhere is this clearer than in the entire history of the Roman Empire. For Rome, the secret to immortality was not marble, bronze, or iron. It was something deceptively humble: concrete, a gray mixture that became the bones of empire. Walk into the Pantheon, look up. A dome wider than the U.S. Capitol's rotunda, poured without steel reinforcement, still flawless after nearly 2 millennia. The Colosseum, scarred by earthquakes and plunder, still looms over the eternal city. Roman harbors, built before the birth of Christ, continue to resist waves that erode modern piers in a generation. Rome's secret was not just durability, it was growth. Their concrete didn't weaken, it healed. Roman engineers mixed volcanic ash, lime, and seawater to create opus caementitium. Unlike modern Portland cement, which fractures and crumbles, Roman concrete reacted to cracks. Minerals crystallized inside, sealing fractures shut. Their structures grew stronger with time, not weaker. In 2017, scientists examining ancient harbor walls found crystals of aluminum, tobermarite, inside Roman concrete. Minerals formed as seawater seeped through. Instead of eroding, the concrete created new bonds. 2,000 years of storms had made it tougher. Rome poured stone that learned to heal. We pour stone that learns to die. Think about the implications. Bridges that didn't collapse, warehouses that never rotted, cities that climbed higher on daring vaults and arches. Roman landscapes of power amphitheaters, temples, aqueducts were only possible because of this gray miracle. But concrete was more than material. It was philosophy hardened into stone. The Colosseum was not just an arena. It was a monument to state dominance, poured in layers of concrete. The Pantheon was not just a temple. It was Rome's cosmos made visible, a dome representing the heavens, the oculus its eternal sun. Every arch, every vault declared, "We are permanent. We will outlast time itself." For citizens walking beneath, the message was clear. Rebellion was futile against walls that looked immortal. Rome's concrete promised eternity. America's promises last until the next budget cycle. America calls itself a superpower, yet its infrastructure tells another story. In 2007, the I-35W bridge in Minnesota collapsed into the Mississippi River, killing 13. In 2021, inspectors declared more than 45,000 U.S. bridges in poor condition. Meanwhile, Roman aqueducts and amphitheaters, abandoned for centuries, still stand. Rome's engineers built for centuries. Ours build for election cycles. Highways buckle, levees fail, concrete overpasses in Los Angeles crumble within decades. Meanwhile, the Pantheon's dome, a 2,000-year-old experiment, remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Perhaps the truest technology is not speed, it is permanence. Rome's engineers believed longevity itself was innovation. Their works were letters to the future, carved in stone. Our society builds with speed, debt, and obsolescence. We pour concrete as if borrowing from tomorrow. Rome poured as if speaking to eternity. Walk through Washington, D.C., the U.S. Capitol, the Supreme Court, the Jefferson Memorial are all echo Roman grandeur. Domes and columns deliberately copy the Pantheon. But beneath the marble facades lies modern concrete, fragile, repair-prone, temporary. Rome's substance has become our symbol. We inherited the look of power, but not its durability. Rome's stones are still alive. Will ours even be remembered? Here lies the paradox of progress. We believe ourselves more advanced, but Rome reminds us, longevity is its own form of technology. Every time you walk under the Pantheon, or trace the Colosseum's arches, you aren't walking through ruins. You are walking through an argument, a challenge flung across centuries. If our empire fell, why are our walls still standing? So ask yourself, when future civilizations dig through our highways, bridges, and cities, what will they find? Monuments that endure or ruins that testify to our impatience? Rome's concrete is still alive. What will ours say about us? Invisible networks of power. Empires don't collapse when walls fall. They collapse when the systems beneath the walls stop working. When we think of Rome, we imagine marble temples, gladiators, and marching legions. But Rome's true genius was not in what dazzled the eye. It was in what ran silently beneath the surface. Sewers, water pipes, postal roads, fire brigades. Invisible systems that held millions of lives together, like veins and arteries in a body. These hidden networks made the empire breathe. The Cloaca Maxima, Rome's first lifeline. One of the earliest and most enduring feats of Roman engineering was not glamorous at all. The Cloaca Maxima, literally the Great Drain, was begun in the 6th century BCE under Rome's kings and expanded for centuries after. Its purpose was deceptively simple: drain marshes, carry sewage, and channel stormwater into the Tiber. But its effect was revolutionary. Rome could grow. Disease was less rampant. Crooked streets became livable neighborhoods. Sections of the Cloaca Maxima are still functioning today, more than 2,500 years later. Imagine an American sewer lasting to the year 4500. It sounds absurd, yet Rome accomplished it before electricity, before steel, before modern science. The sewer's tunnels were so large that boats could pass through them. Ancient writers tell of criminals fleeing into its dark channels, and priests performing purification rituals there. In Roman thought, waste was not just physical, it was spiritual, something to be tamed, redirected, and buried beneath the city's foundations. Postal roads. Information is empire by Augustus's reign. Rome had invented something extraordinary, the cursus publicus, a state-run postal system. Along the major roads stood relay stations, where fresh horses and couriers waited. Messages could travel up to 50 miles per day, leaping from one station to the next. For the first time in history, an emperor could send an order from Gaul to Syria in weeks, not months. To the people, roads meant trade. To the emperor, roads meant information, and whoever controls information controls power. Think of the internet, fiber optic cables across oceans, satellites in orbit, data centers humming invisibly in the desert. Few people see them, but they shape everything we do. Rome's couriers were slower, but the principle was the same. Communication is empire's nervous system. The vigiles, fire and watch. Rome was a city of wood, cramped apartment blocks called insulae, some 6 stories tall. Fires were constant, catastrophic. Enter the vigiles, a force created by Augustus in 6 CE. Officially, they were firefighters. Unofficially, they were also police, night watchmen, and spies. By saving homes, they earned loyalty. By patrolling streets, they kept order. By reporting whispers of conspiracy, they secured the emperor's grip. Before Augustus, the richest man in Rome, Crassus, ran his own private fire brigade. When a house caught fire, his men would arrive not with water, but with offers to buy the property at a discount. Only once the desperate owner agreed would the fire be extinguished. Augustus saw the danger of such private power and turned firefighting into a state monopoly. Rome learned early that even flames could be political. Think of FEMA after Hurricane Katrina. Think of private companies managing data that governments rely on. When crisis strikes, who controls the rescue? Rome teaches us it's not always about putting out fires. It's about who gets to decide which fires are worth putting out. Rome reminds us that empires are not sustained by spectacles alone. Bread and circuses may keep the crowd calm, but sewers keep the city alive. Postal relays carry obedience across distances. Fire brigades enforce security at night. The real machinery of empire is quiet, invisible, taken for granted until it breaks. And when it breaks, collapse comes quickly. When aqueducts were cut, Rome thirsted. When sewers clogged, disease spread. When couriers failed, governors rebelled. To the average Roman, it might have seemed sudden. One day the city hummed, the next it faltered, but the collapse had begun long before. Underground, unseen. What holds America together? Not monuments, not even the military. It's the power grid, the internet backbone, the pipelines that carry oil and water. In 2003, a single power line failure in Ohio triggered a blackout that left 50 million Americans in the dark. In 2020, a cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline caused gas shortages across the East Coast. These were not foreign invasions. They were failures of invisible systems. Rome would have understood. So the question is not whether empires fall when enemies breach the gates. The question is, what happens when the networks beneath our feet give way? Rome's silent systems whisper a warning across time. The greatest threats to empire are not always seen marching at the walls. Sometimes, they are leaking quietly through the drains. Engineering as empire's DNA. Every empire leaves behind weapons. Rome left behind roads, domes, and arches. But the real weapon was the idea that engineering could make power eternal. Rome's aqueducts, sewers, roads, and amphitheaters were not neutral structures. They were political texts written in stone. Every brick carried a message. Every arch reinforced obedience. To live inside Rome was to live inside an engineering philosophy. Power should not just be seen, it should be felt, touched, walked upon, and impossible to escape. Milestones as propaganda. Travel along a Roman highway, and every mile you would see a milestone, a cylinder of stone, carved with the emperor's name. It didn't simply tell you how far to the next town. It reminded you who owned the ground beneath your feet. Infrastructure was turned into a constant whisper of imperial authority. You travel because Rome wills it. You prosper because Rome provides. The Via Augusta in Spain alone contained over 400 such milestones. Imagine driving the length of Interstate 95 and seeing a president's name carved on every exit sign. Rome branded the empire, not with slogans, but with granite. Engineering as colonization. Rome's conquest wasn't finished on the battlefield. It was cemented literally by construction. Conquer a province, and almost immediately amphitheaters, forums, and baths would appear. Roman engineers poured their concrete into the soil of Gaul, Britain, North Africa, and the Near East. These weren't gifts to the conquered, they were anchors, binding local identity into the orbit of Rome. In Britain, the town of Bath, named for its natural hot springs, was Romanized by massive bath complexes and temples. 2,000 years later, the city's very name still carries the empire's stamp. Rome didn't just rule people, it ruled landscapes, renaming them in concrete and stone. America projects power the same way. The Hoover Dam was hailed as a temple of democracy. Washington, D.C. was designed with domes and columns to echo Roman majesty. Even abroad, U.S. bases often feature airstrips, highways, and infrastructure projects that reshape local economies. Rome understood, empire is not just military, it is infrastructural. Whoever builds the bridges and dams owns the future. Yet Rome's story warns us, permanence is an illusion. The Colosseum once proclaimed eternity, but today it is half ruin. Aqueducts once symbolized abundance, but when Goths cut them, Rome starved and thirsted. The very monuments that proclaimed power also revealed its fragility. A cracked aqueduct was more dangerous than a defeated legion. A silenced sewer more devastating than a lost battle. The United States faces a similar paradox. Our monuments are grand, our skyline bold, but our highways crumble, our bridges rust, our levees break. Hurricane Katrina revealed New Orleans' defenses as fragile. Flint, Michigan, showed how poison water can erode trust in government. The infrastructure that should symbolize permanence instead exposes fragility. Rome whispers, neglect your networks, and even your mightiest monuments will ring hollow. Rome's engineering was not just technology, it was identity. To be Roman was to walk Roman roads, to bathe in Roman baths, to marvel at Roman domes. Power was not abstract, it was poured into the very stones underfoot. Even after the empire crumbled, the roads remained, the aqueducts stood, the domes inspired. The shadow of Rome lived on, carried not by emperors, but by infrastructure. And here lies the haunting truth. America too defines itself by engineering. Highways, skyscrapers, dams, Silicon Valley server farms humming invisibly in the desert. These are not just tools. They are statements of who we are. But will they endure? Rome thought its works eternal, and in some ways, they were. But the empire that built them still fell. So ask yourself, if engineering is empire's DNA, what are we writing into the future? When archaeologists millennia from now uncover the remnants of our highways and towers, will they see monuments of permanence or ruins of arrogance? Rome's stones still stand. What will ours say about us? We inherit what we forget. To trace these aqueducts, roads, and domes is to walk through the entire history of the Roman Empire. They were not just feats of engineering. They were ideology, cast in stone. They told every citizen, this empire is forever, and yet forever ended. So look around, the highways that carve our cities, the skyscrapers that pierce the clouds, the pipelines and power grids that hum beneath our feet. What story are they telling? Are we building monuments to a republic or laying the foundations of a ruin? The answer won't be written in marble. It will be written in concrete, steel, and time. And one day, someone will walk among our remains and ask the same question we now ask of Rome. What did they believe would last forever? Now I want to hear from you. Do you think America is repeating Rome or escaping it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story of ancient power and modern echoes spoke to you, give this video a like, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more journeys through history's hidden lessons. Because history isn't finished, it's happening now.